Welcome back to the Unraveled Podcast. My name is Nina.
And my name's Alina. And today, I had an interesting story I wanted to tell you.
Okay.
So one of my agents, Raphael, got he had multiple offers on this listing that he had for sale. It was a fixer-upper.
Was it the investment property in Oconee?
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Okay.
And one of the offers he got was from a guy. He said he didn't have an agent. So immediately Raphael's thinking, okay, I'm going to basically have to work with this client as a customer because he's obviously already representing the seller. And we just don't do dual agency. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in it. I don't think it's practical for you to say you're representing two people. Like, it's just, we don't do it. Not a thing. Don't believe in it. Mm-hmm. So the offer sent him was verbal. He sent a text message saying, this is how much I want to offer. Basically, I'm offering you $15,000 less because I'm representing myself and the buyers. And I'm taking what the seller would pay as a buyer's agent and coming in less by that difference. Mm-hmm. And obviously he didn't know how to handle the situation because he's never had that happen before. So we hopped on a 3-way call with me, him, and the buyer. And we talked about it. I had to explain to the buyer that, even though you're representing yourself, you would still be representing yourself either way because Raphael's already representing the seller, so he could not represent you. So you would still be here as a customer. So you'd still have to sign a customer agreement to establish some form of relationship. Mm-hmm. And with you being a customer, you technically are representing yourself. So you are right about that. But the fact is there's still a buyer's agent commission still exists, rather there's representation or customer representation.
Yeah.
So you reducing your offer by $15,000 less the buyer's agent commission, that's not really yours to negotiate because there's still a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
I said, you can go get representation if you want to. It's still not going to change the fact that there's still a buyer's agent involved in the transaction. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, the buyer side of a transaction, the buyer's agent side of the transaction has the most responsibilities when you're under contract because they're the ones having to draft up all the paperwork and the documentation. They're the ones submitting everything. They're the ones scheduling everything. They're the ones making sure that everything happens in a timely fashion. So they take on about 70% of the weight of being under contract than the listing agent even does. The listing agent takes a lot of the weight putting the listing on the market and marketing the listing.
Yeah.
But the buyer's agent is what's handling and pushing the transaction from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So I had to explain to him that, yes, I understand that you want to use that as a negotiation factor in your offer, but unfortunately it doesn't become your commission because you're not coming with an agent. There's still an agent that has to handle your side of the transaction. And I said, even if in his offer, he had mentioned that he would draft up an offer. And I said, even if you draft up an offer and send it to us, I would still have to redraft it and put it on one of our document forms. We cannot properly represent our client as a seller on a document that we're unfamiliar with and we don't know anything about, versus our GAR forms are made for real estate agents. They were drafted by lawyers and we're very familiar with them because we've used them for years. Mm-hmm. So either way, there's still work that a buyer agent has to do on your end. Yeah. And regardless if you are representing yourself, which again, you still technically are, there's still a buyer agent involved. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the public understands that there is two forms of relationship that you can have with an agent. It's either a customer or a client. Mm-hmm. And as a customer, there is no representation. You're literally just drafting paperwork on their behalf. Mm-hmm. You're not advising them. You're literally just pushing stuff. You're just pushing the paperwork. Mm-hmm. Versus as a client, you're actually representing that person. You're advising them. You're coaching them. You're counseling them. You're drafting. You're still doing everything a customer you would do for a customer as well, but you're giving them that counsel as well. And you're truly representing them and you're going to bat for them. Which is a completely different relationship than a customer.
Yeah. And also the other thing too, I think of when you say this, you tell me the story is he assumes the amount of compensation that's being paid. The compensation being paid is decided and agreed upon between the seller and the listing agent, his agent.
Correct.
You don't know if that's 1%, 15%, who knows? And so it's like you said, he has no room to negotiate that because that is between the listing agent and the seller directly.
Right. And the funny thing is too, is he's not even, a typical buyer wouldn't even pay their agent. Yes, a world exists where it is the responsibility of the buyer to pay their agent, but it's not your funds to negotiate because you're not the one paying the agent.
Yeah.
It'd be one thing if you were like, oh, I'm going to pay this agent 3% for representing me. Those are your funds to negotiate. Mm-hmm. But for you to negotiate a contract between the seller and the agent on their mm-hmm. commission is outlandish, quite honestly.
And, because of the changes that are happening within the real estate industry when it comes to commission, and I think it's great, but it's also both realtors and consumers are going to have to understand this guy's probably went directly to the listing agent thinking he was going to get some kind of deal because he misunderstands how it works. Like the majority mm-hmm. of consumers misunderstand how commissions are broken down or compensation is broken down. The agreement is between the seller and the other agent. And then the agent, by direction of the seller, may or may not choose to share compensation with that other agent. Mm-hmm. But if there's no other agent and that one agent has to do everything, I mean, mm-hmm. a lot of people are assuming, oh, if we just go around and we don't use a buyer's agent, we're going to get a deal. Why would a seller sell their home for less than market value because you don't have an agent? Mm-hmm. That makes no sense. Exactly. They're going to sell, and I'm sure out of the multiple offers, you guys ended up choosing an offer that was very competitive and it suited exactly what the seller wanted.
Full price, no contingencies.
Mm-hmm. And I know the agent who has the buyer too, and they are excellent. Mm-hmm. So it's assumptions that buyers make now that, oh, okay, we no longer have to pay agents. Well, good luck with that, because tell me, if you were a seller, would you sell your home for $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 less?
And even if the seller has an agent, the agent still has to do the work for the buyer. Mm-hmm. So there's still a relationship that exists and compensation that has to be paid for that work. Mm-hmm. So just because you come unrepresentative, it's not going to change the negotiations of your contracts and the all to say, come represented. If you're going to mm-hmm. have to pay for an agent, get the representation that you need.
And I mean, anyone's allowed to offer whatever they want. Correct. It's a free market. You do what you want to do. Like, feel free to make offers 10 times a day. Correct. But you can't be upset then if your offer is not accepted or Correct. If the seller ends up choosing a different offer.
Correct.
Just because you're assuming the seller doesn't have to pay that commission. Mm-hmm. Those are just assumptions. You have no idea what the agreement is between the seller and that agent.
But the good thing is I talked to the buyer. He was totally understanding of it, totally respectful. And he understood. He ended up retracting his offer because the numbers didn't work for him anymore. Mm-hmm. But he understood what I was saying in that aspect, which was good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Agency is an important thing for people to understand. If you think you're going to get a deal, and sometimes... Okay, let's use this example because I've had it happen before where I see contracts where the person is able to negotiate the price down a bit, but they don't have representation. It's customer. And then after the fact, they find out something and they're unhappy. They don't have a leg to stand on because they chose to not have representation. They chose to represent themselves. And of course, they didn't know what to ask for, and they had no agent to counsel them and kind of show them, these are the things we need to inspect. These are the things we need to look out for. And sure enough, it turned out not good. And then they're mm-hmm. surprised. So is it worth it to just get that small price reduction and then have to deal with all the consequences later?
No, I agree. And you also talked about like having an agent to advise you through that. Like, let's talk about due diligence period, which I feel like isn't talked about enough either, mm-hmm. because Georgia is a buyer beware state, which basically means like, buyers, you're on your own, mm-hmm. And it's your responsibility.
Sellers' disclosures are not required.
That's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're on your own. It's your responsibility to do your due diligence to make sure that the house is suitable for what you want. And I think sometimes that buyers go into this thinking that the sellers are supposed to or they're required to disclose certain things. Yes, they are required to disclose things that they know of. Mm-hmm. But then how are you going to prove that someone didn't know about something? Like, that's a whole nother conversation within itself. Yeah. But it's your responsibility as a buyer to do your due diligence. And if you're concerned about pedophiles and you have kids, and it's your responsibility to check the neighborhood and mm-hmm. make sure that it's within the criteria that you want. if you're concerned about a leaky roof or foundation issues, it's your responsibility to make sure you have an inspection done and those things get checked. It's not the seller's responsibility to provide you a sound house. It's your responsibility to make sure that the house is sound enough for you.
Yeah. And, there's some buyers that are very experienced. They've been buying a long time, that they know all of this information. And do they actually need a realtor? Through probably trial and error and mistakes and money that they've lost.
Sure.
Now they're at the point where they could probably, they know what to look out for, if
Right.
it's a savvy investor. But for most people that only buy or sell once or twice in their lifetime, they have no clue what to look out for.
But even the investors that have bought thousands of dollars of real estate, they still use a real estate agent.
Yes. And so you want to ask yourself why that is. This is what I always tell people. If there's an investor whose their forefront thing in their mind is money, okay, saving money, making money, why would an investor see any value in using a realtor if we're supposedly useless? Well, it's because through their experience, the hassle that they get saved, the work they get saved, and all the little things, like we're their eyes and ears. I could look at a property and I'm not an inspector, but you can immediately see the things to look out for.
Correct. And also the cost of what things will cost to get fixed.
I was showing a property to a client the other day, and the first thing I do is I look at ceilings. I want to see if there's a second floor, first and foremost, so where's the bathroom? And of course, there was a water stain, leak. And when I pointed that out to them, they said, I didn't even look up. So imagine if I wasn't here, you may have put in an offer and purchased a home, may or may not have gotten an inspection, and there's a roof leak or a leak from the bathroom upstairs, just different things. I think you look at things differently versus just a buyer.
A buyer, agreed. A buyer's kind of focused. I feel like when a buyer's walking into the house, they're focused on the aesthetics so much, not so much like the hidden condition. Like, yes, you can walk in a house and see that the floor looks bad or, whatever. But again, those are aesthetic. Those are cosmetic things. You're not paying attention to the foundation of the house and if this house is going to be sustainable long-term and that kind of stuff. First, we're looking at those kind of things because we know what our client's goal is at the end of the day. Like I was having a conversation with a client the other day and he's trying to find a house. We've been looking at a lot of houses. We've looked at a lot of houses, made a lot of offers on a lot of houses. Missed out on some houses, won some houses. It's a little bit of everything. But, it comes down to it. And he's looking at a house that's a split level, and split levels, we all know you got to go up and you got to go down. There's no like walking in and there's a main floor. And I know his goal long-term is for this to be his forever home. So I had a conversation with him. I told him, like, this house is great. I think it's perfect. I know I love that you love it, but let's talk about what it looks like long-term for you. Yeah. This house long-term is not going to work for you. You're the only way you can access upstairs master and the kitchen area and the main area is by either parking in the basement, parking in the garage, which is downstairs. Then you got to go up some stairs or walking up the front set of stairs and then go up some more stairs. So long-term, it's not going to be suitable for you. And about 10 years, you're going to call me because you're going to need to sell it again. And yes, I would love to help you sell it. But at the end of the day, I know your goal is to find your forever home. And this may not be it. Obviously, I cannot make that decision for you. This is me just being here to counsel you through this life decision that you're trying to make and make sure that it really does work for you long-term. And at the end of the day, again, if you want to buy it, I'll draft the contract up. I'll do whatever you need me to do. But I'm not going to let you make this decision without my advice and me doing my job and what you hired me for.
And actually, it's when an agent says those type of things, to me, it shows that they're thinking about the client before themselves. Because if an agent was just thinking about their paycheck, they just want an easy sale. And they will definitely want to sell it again down the road. So it'd almost be in the best interest of the agent to say, yeah, let's do it. Let's lock it under contract and close because then you can sell it later. But telling the client, hey, these are the red flags that you might tentatively run into. This is how I would avoid it. And if they still choose to move forward, then that's great. But it shows that you're not just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about their quality of life.
Right. And I've had clients still proceed with it and they end up having to call me a year or two later to resell it. And I had that situation happen and they couldn't afford to resell it because the market value hadn't went up enough. And then, because it was in a neighborhood with a bunch of new construction. So the value was kind of stagnant. So I ended up not charging them commission to resell it for them. But again, that was just me. If they had went to anybody else, they would have been in the hole probably 10 or 15 grand to make something work.
I know we're kind of going back to what we were talking about before, but I cannot tell you how much I hate split level homes.
I know.
I hate them. Whose idea was that? I want to know.
Honestly, like I understand why some people love it because it's like you can get a basement out of it. Mm-hmm. Like you can have a couple bedrooms in a basement without having a full basement.
But they're ugly. Especially where the second level like goes over the garage, and like the garage is here. No.
I think the exterior, I don't care for the exterior of it as much. See, and I've seen some that are nicer. I like the split levels.
I don't care for the exterior. I say they're ugly.
I think the interior, I think the floor plan is very unique. I love the interior floor plan. I've even seen some split levels where they don't have as many stairs in the front. You have like a nice wide front porch. You walk in the house, and then the split is off to the side where you can go but everything is still on the main. Mm-hmm. So you still have your kitchen on the main. You still have your living room on the main. So you're walking into the main floor, and then you turn, and then there's the split. Mm-hmm. I think that floor plan is more practical, especially for someone who's looking for a little longer term situation, because a lot of the times those stairs there's not as many stairs on a split like that.
Yeah. It's true. The ones where the split, it's off to the side, those do make more sense.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was a period of time where builders built a lot of, especially Barrow County.
Yes. Stop. And you would look at the split levels, and you would look up, you'd look down from the bottom of the stairs up, and you would be like still looking up because the stairs in the front just keep going up. And I'm like, what the hell? Yeah. Who came up with this floor plan?
Yeah.
But realistically, I think they didn't think about the fact that nobody was really going to be using those stairs because people go through the garage, but the guests would be using the stairs, and it's a hell of a lot of stairs.
Yeah. So
I don't know. That's just my opinion.
But it's so interesting when it comes to like looking at a house. If a buyer's looking, they might be looking at the paint colors or like the pretties, the kitchen, the cabinets.
All things that you can change.
But what they don't realize is, and what I typically look at, I'm looking at the structural things. The house might be perfect, but then if I can see that the basement is going to cost you $40,000, it doesn't matter how perfect the house is. Right. You have to understand that you're also taking on that project. So if you still want to proceed, that's great. Mm-hmm. I purchased a property a few years ago where we got a great deal for it. It needed a heck of a lot of work, but we knew that going in to purchasing that property, we would get our value out of it, but it took all this work. Some big costs, roof, foundations, water, termites, all those things are the enemy of your house. But the kitchen's beautiful. I love the floors. But
let's pay attention to the bigger ticket items that are really going to cost you a lot more down the road. Yeah.
And it blows my mind how many buyers also don't attend their own inspections. So they'll be purchasing a house.
That's me. I don't.
Well,
I didn't even get a home inspection on my house.
Well, so you're a little bit different though, because you're not like a typical home buyer,
okay, that's
right?
fair. That's fair.
So if you're talking about someone who's not in the industry,
okay,
they're just buying a home, I'll ask them, I'm going to be there the whole time. Would you like to attend with me? I prefer that you do. Or if they do, they'll come for like the last 5 minutes. Do you have any questions for the inspector? No, I don't. And I'm thinking, this is where you ask the questions. This is where you'd be taking notes, because any property I purchased, a year or two later. Inspection? Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. A year or two later, I'm looking back at that inspection report to remind me, okay, what did I need? What are some things I need to work on?
That's smart.
Different things like that, but it doesn't matter how pretty the house looks. There's certain things that will cost a home buyer a lot of money.
It's funny, when I bought my house, I was more focused on the age of it. I did not want a new house at all. Mm-hmm. I wanted something that was kind of at least 10 to 15 years old. Mm-hmm. Something that's old enough where not new enough where I was having to deal with a lot of new stuff, like we talked about in the new construction podcast, but also old enough where the previous owners have already experienced everything, and a lot of those stuff has gotten fixed. And then I'll be by the time I purchased mine, I probably have about 7 to 8 years in my house before some shit really starts happening, like the HVAC breaks down or the roof is falling apart or something like that. So I really focused on purchasing a house that was in the perfect in between of age, that gave me time to live in it and without having a bunch of shit happen at once, basically. So when I bought it, obviously I didn't get a home inspection. I could care less about it, but I looked at a lot of the major components like the HVAC. I checked the age of the HVAC. and I, checked the water heater. I checked under the crawl space. I checked like the basic things. And I was like, this is good enough for me. I don't care.
But buyers, do not do this.
Do not do this. And it's funny. I would never advise a client to do that. I would never advise.
But you have to understand, your eyes are different than the typical buyer's eyes. You have already a level of knowledge, skill, and experience that most people won't have. So you're not looking at it in the same way. And then also when it comes to the numbers, you know what works for you and what risk you're willing to take on. Correct. If someone who does not work in real estate buys a house without an inspection, that is a huge risk.
Sure. And I also know what a lot of things cost. Like I knew I wanted to update a refrigerator, but that's like very, very minimal. So I knew I was probably gonna pay a couple grand for that. And I knew I knew based on the HVAC system, 8 to 10 years from now, that's probably going to cost me $10,000 if they go out. But like, I pay attention to all those things to know what things cost. And I know what I'm going to be spending in the next couple of years. But overall, like the house aesthetic wise fit the needs that I want. And even to this day, I've been in my house for almost 2 years. I have not seen a single house that I would buy on the market that fits the needs that I want. So I knew it fit the character and the style that I wanted, that I was like, you know what? I'm okay with this. Let's do it. And, if the HVAC goes out in a year, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with spending that kind of money.
There's two more things I want to say about inspections, too. Number one is that the value of being there for the inspection is being able to look and see some of these things 5 years, 10 years down the road, they will probably need to be replaced. So starting to budget for that now.
Right.
Well, I think that wraps up this episode. Thank you for joining us. We will be back next week. We release a new podcast every Wednesday, and you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for watching.